Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Rod Taylor has been a consultant anesthesiologist in Melbourne for over 25 years. He works with a wide range of surgeons in private practice and also works at the Alfred Hospital Emergency and Trauma Center in Melbourne, Australia. He's had a long-standing interest in anesthesia education, having served as chair of the Medical Education Special Interest Group in the Australian and New Zealand College of Anesthesiologists. I knew I was going to struggle with that word. It's a hard word to say. Dr. Taylor also has an interest in low carbohydrate nutrition. He is the founder of the Low-Carb Down Under website, which hosts a wide range of resources to assist people to optimize their health and weight. This includes a library of hundreds of YouTube videos on medical and scientific topics. Low-Carb Down Under has held many conferences since 2012, which have produced hundreds of more hours of amazing content. I was fortunate enough to meet Dr. Taylor at the Symposium for Metabolic Health in 2023 in San Diego last month, where we had a lovely lunch in the sunshine with two former guests of our show, including Dr. Anthony Chafee, hosted on episodes 261 and 332, and Olivia Quadja, hosted on episode 450 of Boundless Body Radio. Dr. Rod Taylor, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Casey, thank you. A pleasure to be on.
It's a pleasure to host you. It was a pleasure to enjoy that lovely lunch with you. Wasn't that a fun day?
Terrific. Yeah, San Diego at its best. Beautiful sunshine, middle of summer. Mind you, there was a hurricane bearing down on us, which fortunately, Hurricane Hillary, which apparently is very rare on the West Coast. But yeah, we had a hurricane coming at it. But fortunately, it diverted and it didn't affect us as badly as we were concerned it might.
Very true. It was a really rainy day, but luckily that was about the extent of it. Did it affect your travel returning home to Australia?
Not really. It was a bit drizzly on the way up to LA airport, but it was okay. It was fine.
That's good to hear. What were your favorite moments of that conference in particular?
Well, there is great. Look, going to conferences is a great thing to do because you connect with a lot of people, right? So you can really start talking with just about any of the attendees at a conference like that, and they have a story. So this is a wonderful group of people to hang out with because they have improved their nutrition and they have great benefits in their own lives, and they're a very positive group to hang out with, and everybody's got a story. So I mean, it really tells us that nutrition is so important for so many areas of our life, and when we get it right, we're really moving towards our full potential as human beings. So that was always meeting to people and talking to them is really a highlight. So yeah, that's one element. Of course, there are all the great speakers and great bunch of people there. One of my favorites is Mike Eades, of course. Mike Eades, who wrote Protein Power in the 90s with his wife, Mary Dan Eades. Still a great read. By the way, Protein Power 2 is coming out. So
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, Protein Power 2. I'm not quite sure when it'll see the light of day, but I'm going to put it in as a must read. So so just getting back to the good things of the conference. One of the things people often say to me is, how can I help? And I think the first thing I like to say is, number one, show up. And supporting meetings, and that can be in the online space as well, but particularly it's good to go to meetings, see people, connect with people. It encourages everybody who's there. So that's great. But so many fantastic speakers, and of course they are. These talks will eventually see the light of day. Some through Keto Mojo and some through Low Carb Down Under, but also those of you who might have purchased a live stream ticket to the Low Carb USA San Diego meeting also called the Society of Metabolic Health. We'll be able to view some of those now.
Yeah, if you weren't able to attend, that's a great thing to do. But I agree with you completely. Like going to the conference, to be present there, it's so much more powerful, and you get a sense of this collective health and well-being and vibrancy from being there. Like it's one thing to see Gary Taubes through a screen and interview him. It's something quite different to see him in person and how lean and fit he is and how he's aging just amazingly. Same with you and Dr. Chafee and Olivia, who we sat with. Like these people are just going backwards in time seemingly, and just they feel amazing. Their skin is glowing, their countenances are bright, they're happy to share their messages, and it really is a powerful thing. I would love to make it down to Australia one of these years to attend your conference as well. I've been following it for a very,
Yeah.
very long time and would love to
Hey,
attend
great.
it. Yeah.
Mm.
So we've been in Melbourne quite a bit in the last week or so here on the show on Boundless Body Radio. We just interviewed Dr. Peter Bruckner a little while ago and got to chat with him, which was wonderful. The two of you go back and are really, really good friends. I don't think the two of you should be able to hang out without some type of supervision. I feel like you two young whippersnappers can get yourself into a bit of trouble. Is that safe to assume?
Absolutely, yeah. Peter can play up a bit, and look, we've been good friends for probably 10 years now, and working in the same space. So yeah, he's a whole lot of fun, and I'd recommend to any of your viewers, if you haven't watched Peter Bruckner's videos, just go on to Low Carb Down Under. It hardly matters which one you pick. He's very entertaining. He's a funny man. He's got this wonderful, dry, and sometimes self-deprecating humor. So a big recommendation for Peter. And of course, he's doing good things with his organization, Defeat Diabetes, and he's getting plenty of traction with that in Australia. But just while I'm giving my friend Peter Bruckner a plug, I just wanted to hold up the book here, Fat Lot of Good. This is something he wrote about a year ago, maybe a little longer, and it's just a wonderful synopsis for the layperson as their introduction to low carb. So I'd like to give that a plug. We sell books on our website, Low Carb Down Under. So if anybody wants to get it, I mean, it's probably easier to get it from Amazon, frankly, but if anybody wanted to get it through our website, there'd be, we would get it to you.
That's amazing. And you ship all over the world?
We ship all over the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Peter owes you like $20 for making that plug on his book. Joking aside, it's a really good book. It's got a great title. It's provocative, and he does a good job making things very simple in the book. And so I appreciate that he wrote it. And it's tough, even in this space. It's kind of feels like it's up and coming, and kind of we're getting more information and more studies are coming out every single day. We got more anecdotes of people healing and feeling better. It can get a little bit loud and noisy in the space with all kinds of different books and content and stuff like that. And every little bit helps. And he did such a wonderful job writing that book. And again, I love the title. I think it's great.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, he has an amazing personal story of how he found low carbohydrate diets while he was doing coaching with professional teams. And I know you have a really interesting story as well. So would you mind kind of sharing, your interest in the medical field, why you got into the career that you did, and how you found low carbohydrate diets eventually?
Yeah, right. Well, the history for me, it started in the 90s, really. Now, because I'm an anesthesiologist, or we say anaesthetist in Australia, I work in the theatre. I work with surgeons. I work with nursing staff. There are family physicians often assisting the surgeon. So from probably the early 90s, we've been talking about this obesity epidemic. Where's the diabetes coming from? What's going on? And for a long time, we tossed it around, but we never really had any definite ideas as to what was doing it. Was it eat less, exercise more? Was the issue, or what was it? Now, in 2009, someone gave me a book on sugar, and it was called Sweet Poison. It was written by, funnily enough, a Brisbane lawyer, but it was an excellent book. And I read this book and I thought, oh my goodness, sugar is the problem. I cut the sugar out of my diet, and that included 4 or 5 pieces of fruit that I was having at the time, which I thought was healthy and was pretty easy to take to work to stick in your bag. And I just lost 8 kilograms off my middle. I'd been putting a little bit on. I'd always been a skinny guy, but there you go, in your middle, later years, you're packing on weight. So I got off sugar. I found out what sugar was in, and it just made an enormous difference. And I dropped down into a healthy BMI range very quickly. And this really got me interested. So I started reading everything I could. One of the things I did do was walk around our supermarket, as we call them here, your Walmarts and the like, picking up labels, picking up some yogurt, having a look what was in it, figuring out how much sugar was in these products. And of course, it wasn't that easy to figure out. What you had to know that in a gram, because the amounts were expressed in grams, so you had to know that a teaspoon of sugar was 4 grams. And then you could divide the sort of 36 in the little tub of yogurt and realize there were 9 teaspoons of sugar in that little tub of yogurt, which is just frightening, really. So, looking around at that was huge. I would still say to this day, sugar is a huge problem for a lot of people. And so that began my journey. Now, I work at quite a big hospital in Melbourne. Actually, the Epworth Hospital is where I've been based and done a lot of work. I did a research project there, and I recruited 158 staff members at the hospital to a sugar reduction strategy. All they had to do was attend a lecture and fill out a sugar questionnaire. And that research project showed that on average they were having about 24, 25 teaspoons of added sugar a day in the foods that they were consuming. And it was fruit juice, and it was yogurt, and it was, all the things we know about, cakes, cookies, and biscuits. And so they were surprised to find out that they were having, when we translated this sugar calculator, well, it came out as teaspoons of sugar, which is something they could relate to. So I followed them up for 3 months, and on average, they lost 3 kilograms, just cutting sugar. So no, it wasn't a really well done study. In fact, I say it was kind of done out of the boot or trunk of my car, really. Not much resources, but quite a lot of lectures and getting this data. So they lost on average about 3 kilograms. I mean, some lost like 9 kilograms. Wow. It was amazing. But I remember people asked me at the time, what about carbs? What about rice and pasta and bread? And I said, oh, no, it's fine. Just do the sugar. I didn't know anything really about low carb at that time, let's say 2010. So interestingly enough, my study got picked up by one of the very popular newspapers, Sunday newspapers in Australia. And there was a big spread about sugar, not just my study, but some other things as well. And I found that this actually got blogged about all over the world. I hadn't been a great social media follower, but I did some Googling, and there it was. My simple little study was being quoted here, there, and everywhere. So what I discovered, there wasn't actually a big low sugar community. there was a really big low carb community. Based on that, I started going to conferences, a couple of ones in the US, and met great people. I just remember some of those early ones, going and meeting Andreas Eenfeldt and Eric Westman and Steve Finney, and a lot of the people have been really major in this space. So, having attended that, I was with a wonderful Aussie guy from Brisbane called Jamie Hayes, who runs an organisation called Healthy Inspirations. And Jamie said, we've got to do something in Australia. I thought, fine. I actually like organising. I've got to confess to being a bit of an organiser, and always been an organiser through in the anaesthetic community. And so I like organising. Yeah, let's organise a meeting. And we had our first meeting in 2012. And Jamie, incidentally, who still helps a lot with Low Carb Down Under, said, and we should call it Low Carb Down Under. And
love it.
I said, fantastic. And that stuck. And now it's, people know this name in the low carb space. So that's really how I got started. Yeah.
That's amazing. Those sugar numbers are terrifying when you consider that at any given moment, the amount of sugar that you have in your blood, in all 5 liters of your blood, is essentially just less than a teaspoon. And if that goes up to a teaspoon and a half, you'll be diagnosed as type 2 diabetic. And so when you're dumping those amounts, what you mentioned, did you say it was 27 teaspoons a day of added sugar, or 23?
Yes. I think it was about
26.
20 years. It was 26. And that wasn't even including the fruit. So
right.
And this was a very sort of what you might call a casual intervention. They just had to show up to a lecture in their lunch hour or something like that. And the results, I thought, were significant. A lot of them, felt a lot better. But at that point, I didn't really understand that I thought fructose was the huge problem. But it is a huge problem. But there is also the excessive load of glucose that we get from bread, rice, pasta.
Yeah,
potatoes.
totally.
So,
yeah, well, it's cool that you did that. I think those things are still valid. Doing, what you did with the people you did. With the gym that we used to work at, my wife and I, we had to do weight loss contests. We were kind of forced to do them anyway, and they would always fail. And we didn't like doing them. And, it would go for 60 days. And once we found low carbohydrate and ketogenic and saw that it was working for us and for our clients, all we did is the same kind of thing. We did lectures, we did seminars, we taught people what they were going to do. And then we gave people different meal plans that the gym was not giving them. There were ones that we found. We gave them their low carbohydrate. We told people to eat as much of these meals as they liked, whatever recipes they wanted, don't count anything. And the results that we got were incredible. And you're right, like, it's not a randomized controlled trial, but when I can show that 100 and almost 30 people lost 732 pounds, and 720 of those pounds actually came from fat loss, there's a story there. Like, something's going on. If you're able to just tell people to reduce calories, you're not measuring whether they actually are or not, but still in a period of time they've lost an average of 3 kilos. There's a story there. Like, that's telling you something. So it's important to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, Low Carb Down Under has been putting on certainly a good size annual meeting in Australia. Almost every year we had one gap for one of the COVID years. And we've been generating great YouTube content. We've got 480,000 subscribers to the Low Carb Down Under YouTube channel, and I recommend it to all your followers and those listening to this podcast to register your name on the homepage of Low Carb Down Under or in YouTube and get notifications of the great content. So we've hit over 70 million views. So it's very, and this is actually reasonably serious content. It's definitely more on the sciencey medical end of things, not exclusively. If people give good talks, we're not concerned about their qualifications. Or, we just want to get things out there, and we want to get the best people who give the best talks to do them. So yeah. So if I can just recommend to people, if you're still looking around for good information, go to the Low-Carb Down Under YouTube channel on YouTube, or just go to YouTube and put in Low-Carb Down Under and see what's available. There's a little tab there that says most popular. Okay, so you can either have most recent, you can view the most recent YouTube videos, or you can look at what's been most popular over the past 10 years. And of course, the ones that are the most popular are given by great speakers. And the first one that comes to mind is Jason Fung talking about fat storage. He talks about refrigerators and freezers and how we store fat. And it's absolutely fantastic. It's 6 million views, and he's hilarious as well. So it's entertaining, but it's actually it's pretty serious content, and you can't really fail to be moved by it. And if you're eating a standard American or Australian diet, you may not be after you've watched these. So that'd be something I go to. Jason is a terrific guy, and he's made great. He's done great things in the space and continues to. So that'd be a recommendation. For people.
Yeah, that's great. Of the 6 million views, I contributed probably 3 or 4 of them. It was really important in my understanding of metabolism. It was a really important step for me to find Jason Fung and his work. And it really helped me understand how metabolic carts were working, and how ketogenic and intermittent fasting, ketogenic diets and intermittent fasting really can change metabolic rates. So I'm really grateful for him. And he's got a wonderful way of explaining things. He does get a little snarky and has a little bit of sarcasm, which I really love and appreciate. He is very, very funny. I thought, since you have been able to witness so many people, so many amazing speakers, put together all this content, you'd be a perfect person to kind of discuss a bit of the science with. So what was it in 2009? You're a little overweight, not really experiencing very severe health issues. You come across a book that tells you that sugar is the problem. We've been told for 70 years that fat is the problem. Now, if I think about it logically, it's like, yeah, fat is the problem, of course, because I eat fat. It is fat. It's going to be fat in my body. What's the problem with sugar? Like, if I'm not eating a lot of fat, I can have carbohydrates. That's something totally different. We're told that's like energy, quick energy for my bike rides or my hockey games or any of those things. So what if you could, first of all, describe your experience of learning some of this stuff, if it was like immediate, it clicked with you, or you had to really like push through this book. And then secondly, can you explain those mechanisms and why it is that reducing carbohydrates produces ketones, and what those ketones do in our body?
Right. Yeah, this really gets down to the nub of it all. And just to try and make it simple for people, I think the first thing to understand is that we store glucose, sugar, as fat. It's as simple as that. What we don't burn immediately and store in short-term storages as glycogen in the liver and in muscle, we store as fat. So glucose is not an innocent molecule, really. So and that's it. So it's we have been told about fat has been demonized for a long time, probably since about the 70s, and there's lots of YouTubes describing what happened then. But I think the only problem is we got things wrong. The problem was really the carbs, not the fat. And of course, we know a lot of people in our community eat a lot of fat, and I do myself. My diet is probably about 75% fat, and so I eat lots of meat. I eat lots of eggs. I like dairy, and I like my non-starchy vegetables, and that's what I eat, and that adds me up to a moderate protein, probably about 25 grams. 25% of calories from protein, and a small amount from carbs, probably 5%, maybe 10%. It's a bit hard to avoid some carbs, and the rest is fat. So I'm personally eating a high-fat diet, and it took a little while to get a head around that, because we've all been sort of indoctrinated for a long time that fat is evil and causes heart attacks and things like that. But look, it's just wrong. It's just plain wrong. The problem is, sugar, and particularly refined carbohydrates. So yeah, sugar is stored as fat. We can understand from our evolutionary beginnings that we love sugar. It had survival advantage in our, prehistoric past. If you could get onto some honey or fruits or things, which would usually come at the end of summer in temperate areas, you could, as a cave person or early history person, you could fatten up a little bit, and that was great because you had winter coming and you had a hibernation coming. So it was an advantage to be able to pack on a bit of weight before winter came, when food was going to be scarce. So it's kind of understandable that our metabolic processes favor this. The only problem is we get to modern times, we never hibernate. We're eating foods like this 365 days a year. And that's really the problem. So yeah, that's the nub of the fat thing. Yeah. So just on that, I've just had another lot of blood tests done. I regularly check my bloods, and I check. So, here I am eating this very high fat diet, and have been for probably about 10, 12 years now. And so it's interesting to see what it's doing to your blood results. And basically, I'm very happy with my results. Very happy with my results. So I think it's good for all of us to know what's going on and get tests. So, and what I would say the important tests are, particularly around glucose, and that would be your fasting glucose, but better still is your HbA1c, which is the amount of glucose stuck onto your red cells. And that gives you an indication over a longer period of time of whether you've got too much glucose / sugar sticking onto things in your body, and that's not good.
Yes.
So maybe we'll come back to diabetes and things, but what are the other tests that are worth having? Well, your standard lipid profile gives you essentially 4 things: your total cholesterol, your triglyceride level, which is the amount of fat circulating around in your blood at any moment, your HDL, high-density lipoprotein, which is the so-called good cholesterol, and higher levels are associated with better outcomes. And the last one is low-density lipoprotein, LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol. So I think it's good to know those. And the ones you should be most concerned about are triglycerides. And we like to see that below 1. Some of my colleagues have done this, and from their low carb, before they went low carb, they had triglycerides like in the 3s and 4s. And that's not good. They go low carb with very little effort, and the triglycerides down at 1, or my own is 0.8, and I've been measuring that over every year for 10 years or something. So triglycerides is a very good measure of your of things that make you healthier. And the HDL, that's I'm very happy with that too. Now, there are 2 numbers in there. The other 2 numbers, the total cholesterol and the LDL, which go up a bit on a number of people on low-carb diets. And these are the ones that the medical profession get concerned about. The reason they're not actually linked very closely with bad outcomes. But we have a tablet which brings them down, and that's the statin tablets, which is just so many people are on them in our community. And unfortunately, it just doesn't make a statin. It brings down the number, but it doesn't lead to improved outcomes.
That's right.
Very little improved outcomes from taking statins. And this has been dissected by a lot of people in our low carb community. Some of the most popular talks on low carb down under are to do with lipids profiles and statins. And so there's clearly a lot of interest in this. And of course, it's great that we've got people in our community who are questioning and skeptical of what they've been told all this time. So it's very healthy that we question these approaches. So that's in a nutshell. It motivates you to get your numbers done. And also am I genetically lucky, or is it lifestyle? And some of us are genetic lucky and can do pretty much anything and live to a long, healthy life. But you don't really know till afterwards. That's the problem.
Yeah, totally.
And if you are one of the unlucky ones, which is probably most of us, we've got to really get our nutrition in good order in order to not die young, to not suffer from the problems of cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes. Yeah.
Well, I've been to enough of these low carbohydrate conferences that there is such a strong correlation with very lucky genetic individuals and very good health. It seems to correlate really strongly. So I'm going to say that it's lifestyle factors. They're probably something we should really look at, because the number of lucky people I meet at conferences is pretty high. And you know what? It's interesting what you mentioned. I wish more people would consider what you were talking about as far as seasonality. So where I am on the other hemisphere of the globe is you. It's that time of year. So it's the end of summer. Literally at my client's house, I was there a few hours ago. Her peach tree is just starting to have ripe fruit, and she mentioned it's crazy that even 2 days ago the fruit was not ready. Now it's ready. It's the right color. The plant wants you to have that fruit, and it's a very limited number. You could see that a bunch had already fallen down. They had been eaten by birds and insects, so you're already competing with other animals to get them. And this is why a plant gives you the fruit, and it tastes good to all of us, is because it knows that some animals are going to eat the flesh, drop a seed somewhere, and a new tree can grow somewhere. And that's what we have. And yes, when you get those sweet tastes and bright colors, you are rewarded. The dopamine centers in your brain are telling you, like, yes, this is amazing. Have as much of this as you can because of exactly what you said. It will help you to add weight. The weight will help you in the wintertime when there's no more fruit, and you can burn off the fat that you stored when you ate excessive carbohydrates. And you can also find other fats and proteins by doing things like hunting. So it's so important to understand that it is fruit the problem, or is fruit 365 days out of the year, every single year, the problem? Like going to Toronto and eating bananas and mangoes in March doesn't make any sense. But that's what we've done. And to say nothing about all the ultra processed garbage that you find in the middle of the store.
Yeah, no, very interesting on the fruit. My own fruit story includes that when I discovered low carb, I was actually suffering from pretty serious irritable bowel syndrome. And I had no idea, where was this bloating? Where was this gas coming from? Was I swallowing it? What was going on? This is when I might have been eating 4 or 5 pieces of fruit a day. And what might happen, for example, is I might have an apple at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Fine. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I've got this rumbling and discomfort and colic, gas, bloating, very uncomfortable. I had no idea. Was I swallowing this gas? Where did this gas come from? And I think in my case, there's those little chunks of fruit making their way down through the small bowel, getting to the large bowel. The bacteria go to work and producing, loving it, multiplying, producing a lot of gas. And when I stopped the fruit, my irritable bowel went away. It went away in 24 hours. I mean,
Wow.
for something that I'd suffered. And, if I were to reintroduce a bit too much fruit, it would come back. Now, the question is, a lot of people say, well, I can eat lots of fruit and I don't get it. I think, we're a little bit different, all of us, in how our gut behaves. And in someone like me, I suspect those little chunks of apple or pear or whatever make their way down a bit quicker. They don't get all absorbed, and the bacteria are there. They get down quickly, and they go to work. And you've got so just on that. Just while we're on gut health, we've got some great talks from gastroenterologists on low carb down under. I'd like to single out a few. One is a guy called Andrew McIntyre. He's a gastroenterologist on the Sunshine Coast above Brisbane in Australia. And every one of his patients, and this guy sees a lot of patients, goes out of the consultation with at least a flyer on low carb. So, it's a great talk. It's one of the best talks we've got up there. It's a couple of years old. There's other gastroenterologists, Pran Yoganathan, who's based in Sydney, who, he's the same. He gets great results with his patients with their gut conditions, not only their metabolic health and their weight, but also these gut, not only irritable bowel, but also inflammatory bowel disorders like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. People really suffer with conditions like that. And yet, if they get their diet right, there's some remarkable transformations in their gut health as a consequence. And there's a quite recent one by a gastroenterologist in Adelaide. His name's Jonathan Martin. It's only a few YouTubes ago on Low Carb Down Under. So absolutely the same, just terrific results with the patients. But he's got an interest in fatty liver disease, and some of these things just get better so quickly on a low carb diet.
Yeah, it's amazing. If you see it the first time, you almost don't even believe it. But once you've seen it as many times as you and I have seen it, it's the expected result. You expect that to happen. So you'll appreciate this. I don't know if you know the beer making process, but one of my clients does his own beer. He makes home brew himself, and you take grains, you soak them at a certain temperature to basically separate the sweet part of the grain with the more complex part of the grain. You keep the sweet part, you cook it down with your ingredients, and then at the end of the process, you put it into a big, fermenter. It's like glass, so you can actually see it, and you add yeast to it, and then you add an airlock at the top, and so the airlock allows air to escape without letting any in. And what happens is when you first start it, the airlock is going crazy. It's bubbling and bubbling and bubbling and bubbling because the yeast is converting all of the usable sugar into gas. And my client's one of his favorite recipes that he wins awards for is a mango beer. And so what you do is you take your base recipe, and it ferments for a few weeks, and then the bubbling slows down and stops as the yeast has eaten all the sugar. And then after a few weeks, he pitches a whole bunch of mangoes back into the batch and lets it go. And that amount of sugar kicks up the airlock again. It starts bubbling like crazy because of all the sugar fermenting. So of course you were experiencing some of those symptoms from too much fruit that was in the intestines and was probably fermenting and causing all kinds of different problems. Like people don't really consider that.
Yeah. No, it was just so dramatic for me and made my quality of life much better.
Yeah, good
Yep.
for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Another funny thing when you said, I'll eat the fruit, and by 5 p.m. if I have the fruit at 2, by 5 p.m. I'm really hungry. Man, even that is a long time. For me, that would be if I had the fruit at 2, it would be 2:30 that I would be starving. And it's part of the primary
Yes.
reason that I've stayed on carnivore. It's like I is fruit good? Is fruit bad? Is it seasonal? I'm just going to skip the whole thing because it makes me really, really hungry. And when I get hungry, it's like you described. It's an intense hunger. And now I'll eat anything. I'll have whatever trash is out there, not just fruit. And so for me, it just became easier to skip the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're sort of bringing up the topic of reactive hypoglycemia. That is, if you have some fruit, for example, it spikes your blood glucose. The pancreas releases insulin, really drops that glucose, and you get a low glucose, and you're starving and you're hungry, and you're having to eat every couple of hours because you're riding this glucose roller coaster. Whereas if you're eating more protein and fat, you're smooth. You just don't get hungry. You don't get hangry. I'm sure your listeners and followers out there, they'll all be nodding with this. They've all done it, and they know how well this works. And it's so lucky that we're some of the people who've found this, and we've got these improvements in our own lives and lots of elements of our lives.
Yep.
Day-to-day quality, mental health improvements, weight improvements, mood improvement. Yeah, getting your nutrition right is just so central to
Yep.
having a good life. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. I really wanted to talk to you about your conference, Low-Carb Down Under, and I wanted to talk about your evolution. So how has your conference evolved over time as you think back on the first year, 2 years, 3 years? Like, was the room getting a little bit bigger? Was the information changing at all? Like, how was that evolving over time?
We started small, and it's kind of progressively grown. We had one meeting that was just huge where Tim Noakes was in Melbourne in Australia.
Wow.
And the word got round, and that was absolutely massive. Of course, he's a South African professor who's a wonderful speaker, and he's been right out there and faced a lot of hostile criticism, and has been attacked by some of the older vested interests. So Low Carb Down Under. So it's great. We say on our website, what do we do? Well, essentially, we bring people together who have an interest in low carbohydrate nutrition. So I think that's been a great thing of Low Carb Down Under. There are actually I'm not an amazing speaker, and so I'm kind of an organizer person. So that's kind of what I like doing, getting other people up there and, spotting talent, bringing them together and putting things up on Low Carb Down Under. But so the conference is, the quality of our speakers has always been good, but it's got better and better. And there are just outstanding people. We've got a conference in Sydney in another month, and we've got a number of people internationally coming. Mike Eads from the US, who wrote Protein Power. By the way, I'd like to put in a plug. Mike puts out a newsletter every week. It's called The Arrow. So Google Eads, Eades, Mike, The Arrow. He puts out a wonderful newsletter, and it's got a lot of things in it, but there's some really good, serious, sciencey stuff in there. So I'm going to give Mike a bit of a plug. He's got 4 or 5 amazing talks on Low Carb Down Under. One of them is paleopathology, which is, what do we know about what people ate in the past and how did it affect their health? Absolutely fantastic. He's got another one that talks about our energy production. And those of you who are a bit geeky might like to get into the electron transport chain in mitochondria. And we hear a lot about mitochondria now. It's absolutely fantastic stuff. And it makes you realize that our bodies are really exquisite machines. The idea that we could put second-rate fuel into our exquisite machines is just, it's not right. So what you eat to make things work optimally and avoid bad things happening to us in the future. I thought I just might digress a little bit and talk about death. So now death is something that we all want to avoid. And the question is, well, how do we avoid death? How do we avoid early death? I mean, it's all going to catch up with us all eventually. But we want to have a long, healthy, ripe old age. Now, what gets in the way of that? Well, number one is heart attacks. 50%, a bit more of us are going to succumb to a heart attack. What comes next? Well, strokes. Who wants one of those? If it doesn't kill you, it can impair your quality of life. Cancer. Cancer's up there and become more common. And of course, one of the really bad ones that we absolutely are horrified about is dementia, getting dementia. So how can we avoid these things? The answer from me is get your nutrition in order. All those diseases have come about since our food's changed, perhaps over the last 100, 150 years. So it's most important, if you think you can make a difference, you've got to be here. And also you want to be in good health and not a burden on the health system. So for a whole bunch of reasons, being healthy is what we should be doing with these exquisite machines that we've really been gifted with, and getting the right fuel in the machine. You've just got to do it. Yeah.
It's amazing to hear those top causes of death and to know that there is what I would consider extensive research into ketogenic diets and how they impact every single one of those things. And we're learning more and more every year. We're getting more and more anecdotes every year. But there is research out there to support the ketogenic diet improving all of those hard outcomes with death. But it's also so important to keep in mind what you mentioned earlier, which is your day-to-day quality of life. Death is when it ends. Don't you want to enjoy the life that you have on a day-to-day basis while you're here? You might get hit by an anvil walking down the sidewalk. You're so out of control as far as death goes. And a ketogenic diet can help with all of the causes of death that you named. And it can also improve your day-to-day energy, quality of life, your ability to show up and be grateful and hang out with your kids and do activities and explore the world. Like it's so amazing what proper nutrition, like you said, can actually truly do. So yeah, I love that you brought up all of those different causes of death. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And coming along to meetings, you meet people who are really flourishing, who are
yeah,
so feeling so good. These are wonderful people to hang out with. You know, so that's great. I guess the other thing I was going to say, of course, we've got to look after ourselves, but our next interest is to look after those close to us. You know, family, extended family, friends, colleagues, and on a larger scale, we want to look after our communities and our nations and our world. Think of what we could do if we didn't waste so much money on on health and ill health budgets. You know, what a great world we could inhabit. What great societies we could have where people ate good food. You know, we'd be extremely creative. We'd be very well off. We wouldn't be having people with all these sort of miserable conditions. By the way, I do. You know, last week I did a list of a bunch of people from a lower socioeconomic area of my city, and it just brings home to you what they're suffering from. You know, the weight, the diabetes, the tablets they're on, their comorbidities in terms of their joints and weight, and I look at them and think, you know, it's not much fun being 250 or 300 pounds, you know. I see it on a very regular basis, and it's just patient after patient after patient, and you think, you know, things could be so much better for you if you just simply went low carbonate or fat. So
yeah,
it's you know, it's kind of tragic what's going on out there, and it would appear to be getting worse.
yeah.
Fortunately, there's a bit of a beacon of hope with the people who've got onto this that we've been lucky enough to be a part of. But you know, what's going on out there in the community is an absolute disaster, and great that you do a podcast and get this out, and you know, we're working in this space. But you know, at a human level, this is tragedy on a grand scale. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. But you know, we've got our little dog and pony show here with our podcast. You have your amazing conference, and you're creating content and getting that word out. And you know, it does give me hope that people are finding this. These conferences are growing. And just out of curiosity, I did want to ask you, when you started in 2012, I'm assuming there was probably not much of the carnivore movement going on within low carb at the time. How has that been just for you to observe? I know you don't actually follow the exact carnivore diet, but like how has it been to observe the popularity increase in people that choose to eat a zero carbohydrate, all animal product type of a diet?
Yeah, well, that seems to have come out a little more recently in recent years, and people just record fantastic results with it. And I eat a very largely meat, you know, carnivore type of diet myself, not exclusively. Um, you know, I live in a family, and you know, if I lived on my own, I think I would be, you know, completely carnivore. So I think it's great. There are so many good stories about people with autoimmune problems who have cleared up with by going carnivore. There's a wonderful YouTube video that I recommend you all watch. It's by Michaela Peterson, and it was recorded at a carnivore conference in Boulder in Colorado a few years ago, where Low-Carb Down Under had a presence there, and we've been able to post the video. It's been watched like, you know, 1.5 million times, and
Wow.
it's her story. Michaela Peterson, who's incidentally happens to be the daughter of Jordan Peterson, I think, a wonderful free thinker who's improved his own health incredibly by going initially low carb. And so if you want a really, from the heart story and the benefits, it's a change in her life. She's had pretty difficult childhood with health conditions.
Yeah.
So it's inspiring to see Michaela Peterson on Low Carb Down Under. And it's a human story, but it also brings out really fine-tuning things. And for her, it was going completely carnivore. And it's a great talk, highly recommended.
Yeah. I remember watching that one as well. It's really good. Dr. Rod Taylor, this has been such a fun conversation. I so much respect you and the work that you're doing. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you in your work?
Look, lowcarbdownunder.com.au. Register your name in there on the, contact you by email. We don't put out many newsletters, but we are across conferences in Australia and also conferences in the US. So I've been associated with Low Carb Denver for a long time, and now associated with Low Carb USA, the wonderful conferences that Doug Reynolds and Pam Devine put together. So that's where we met in San Diego recently. So that's my little plug to everybody. Stay connected, keep doing it. It's worth it. Makes a huge difference. And, look forward to meeting you and connecting with you over time.
Absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in person someday. And low carb down under. If you could, please coordinate it with the Formula One race that they do in Melbourne. That would be fantastic. I would really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, Formula One racing is very exciting, and it takes place around a lake in
Yeah,
Melbourne called
so
Albert
cool.
Park Lake.
Yeah.
It's very close to where
Beautiful.
I live, and Formula One racing is a whole heap of fun, and I know you love it yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Rod Taylor, thank you again so very much for all the work that you do in this community. Thank you for bringing this message out to others. It's really, really important work, and we really appreciate you and appreciate the time you took to wake up early and be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Casey. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.